Tons of PC hardware news today, but let's start with this. This is kind of interesting. So this, let me get myself out of the way. I'll become the mouse pointer. This is from Clevo. So Clevo makes laptops. A lot of times they get branded under other brands, but they're the actual manufacturer of the laptops. And these laptops we're seeing here seem to be talking about the 2025 Nvidia GPU lineup and what to expect from it. This is pretty interesting, and obviously this information is not supposed to be out there right now. I've seen this reported at a wide variety of websites. The original source seems to be saying that this came from a ransomware attack on Clevo, so don't like the source of the information being ransomware. However, the information is now out here, so what do we see from it? So we see a couple of interesting things. One of them being that, look at the VRAM amounts, okay? So when we look at the 2025 lineup compared to the 2024 lineup, you can see that the high end still has 16 and 12 gigabyte options, although it looks like there's gonna be two 16 gigabyte options here instead of just one. So that's kind of splitting off of the 4090 from the previous generation. Then we'll have a 12 gigabyte option. But notice that cards like the 4070 and 4060 tier are not, I guess I probably shouldn't say card and when we're in the laptop form factor, but GPUs like the 4070 and 4060 will have a successor that are possibly going to be called a 5070 and 5060. But notice that these are listed as 8 gigabyte products. So it's looking like, at least in the laptop space, we are not getting any additional VRAM here. Also interesting to note is the fact that it looks like the lower end chips for the 50 series either don't exist or they will be delayed significantly later than the higher end products, because it looks like we see the 4050 6 gigabyte continuing on into 2025, as well as the 3050 6 gigabyte. Although the 2050 4 gigabyte looks like it will be continued, but then eventually looks like replaced with a 3050 4 gigabyte. So that seems to be what we get out of this. Now, notice we don't have any specific names for any of these things or any of that. So don't, we don't have any particular performance numbers or anything like that. So it's mostly kind of looking at the VRAM amounts as it goes down the product stack. Now, I'm more interested in the desktop side of things than this, laptop side of things. But still, it is pretty interesting to see that those VRAM amounts aren't changing or anything like that, and that the low end looks like it could be delayed a while. Now, as far as how, why would NVIDIA maybe not want to give us more VRAM or anything like that? Well, look at their GPU market share. Like, what they're doing, which has been fairly stingy on VRAM, seems to be working. Their market share has gone to 88%, with AMD taking the other 12%, and Intel being rounded down to 0%, according to the latest info from John Petty Research. I'm finding this here from Tom's Hardware. By the way, all my sources will be linked in the video description as usual. So take a look at this. Once again, I have become the pointer at least. Anyway, we can see that in the latest Q1 2024 results, we see NVIDIA's discrete desktop GPU market share jump from 80% to 88%, while AMD has plummeted from 19% to 12%. Now notice that this is Q1 2024. That's when NVIDIA launched their new Super Series, whereas AMD didn't have quite as exciting of launches. They did have something like the 7900 GRE there to at least do some battle, but that's not competing in all of those price segments. So NVIDIA did kind of improve their offerings in several price points, and it looks like it helped out their shipments for that quarter. Now, if we want to look at shipments of desktop discrete graphics cards rather than market share, you can see this here. And you can see basically, once again, it looking like NVIDIA jumping up here, whereas, and by the way, these are in millions of units, whereas AMD kind of plummets a bit, and Intel drops from 0.1% to 0%, or not percent, but 0.1 millions to 0 millions. So rounded down to basically nothing. So that's another way of looking at that research. And then when you look at just overall shipments of desktop discrete graphics cards total, the entire market kind of did take a little bit of a downturn, actually, from 9.5 million to 8.7 million. So while it was a bit of a down quarter overall, Nvidia took the bulk of that quarter. So anyway, that's where things stand currently. Now, in general, with Nvidia taking such a dominant position, we're seeing actual antitrust probes, but this isn't just looking into Nvidia, it's also looking into Microsoft and OpenAI. And as it looks into Nvidia, this is really not so much about their share of like the gaming desktop graphics cards. This is more of the total, this is more into their AI position. So with AI just absolutely ballooning, and with Nvidia taking such a huge portion of that, and Microsoft's huge push and OpenAI's dominant position, it looks like we could see antitrust probes into this whole setup. It'll be interesting to follow that and see what comes of it. Now, when will we get any new graphics cards? So one interesting thing that happens at Computex is the fact that while there's what's officially announced, there's also the fact that journalists get to talk to people, behind the scenes and get some off-the-record comments. The problem is those off-the-record comments didn't seem to all be lining up at Computex this year. So there's been this videocards.com article is summarizing a bunch of what's been out there, but basically, depending on who you listen to, there's a whole bunch of different answers out there for this. For example, Hassan probably mispronounced it, Mushtaba, who I believe is a WCCF tech writer, says that when he was at Computex, he talked to 4 of the board partners who said that RTX 50 is coming in Q4 2024, and 4 other partners who said it's coming in Q1 of 2025. So, what do you make of that, right? So that could mean that none of them really know exactly when it's coming. They just maybe have some rough estimates. So at this point, I would say it looks like it's either the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025, which is what we've honestly been expecting all along. But basically, the rumors at Computex were mixed between the two. There doesn't seem to be any strong trend to one answer or the other. So I would just say it's around that time, and that's kind of what we were thinking anyway. Now, we do have some more concrete information coming out about AMD's new Ryzen AI 9 HX 370HX. Oh, can we just... Okay, the naming aside, this is AMD's new lineup of APUs, so primarily targeted at, mobile form factor, although they get into like mini PCs and things like that as well. Anyway, there's an engineering sample out there that's getting some results posted, and it is showing being 25% faster than a 7940HS, which, despite the completely different naming scheme, is at least a previous generation AMD APU. Anyway, and this is in a CPU Z test, so there's that, but this is going off of engineering samples, and it's not exactly the same system being tested here anyway, so again, don't read way too much into that. And it's not, and again, this being an HS part versus an HX part, again, this isn't a perfect comparison, but the point is we're starting to see some leaked results coming out from engineering samples that are kind of out in the wild now. It's looking like the screenshot is showing a 798.6 single thread benchmark and 8,893.6 multi-threaded test. And so the result that videocards.com is comparing to is their own 7940HS, so it's not the same person doing both benchmarks. It's videocards.com benchmarking their own 7940HS based mini PC to get a comparison score, where they're seeing 707.3 and 7,089.9 for single thread and multi-thread respectively on their on their test system. So kind of interesting, but don't read way too much into it. What I'm really interested in is how do these stack up against these upcoming ARM-based systems. I'm really interested in what comes of the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite laptops that are about to launch. Just really interested to see if ARM shakes things up, at least in the mobile segment for now. Who knows if eventually that would make inroads in the desktop space. If you're stomping, it's not people stomping on your roof. It's people stomping on my roof. It's my kids playing upstairs. It's the summer. They're home. I'm home. They were playing happily, so I thought I had time to make a quick video. Anyway, that's how we roll here. So I've been trying to find out if anybody was actually able to go hands-on and get some benchmark numbers at Computex with any of the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite stuff. And the best I could find here is at Our Hardware, showing, I guess, in a YouTube video, but the YouTube video is in Russian, so I'm taking the English translation that we have here in Our Hardware post. And there is some interesting information here. They said, during Computex, we've managed to test a Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite in a few apps. They said that their main findings are that it's more than 15% performance difference in 7-zip in favor of the native ARM version when compared to the x86 version. So what does that mean? So most Windows apps aren't going to run on ARM as a native version unless you code it to do so. Well, 7-zip looks like it has a version that's coded to do so. But if you're running native Windows apps that aren't native on ARM, they're x86 programs, this new Windows update and big ARM push has a translation layer to let the non-ARM versions run on ARM. And so it's looking like there's basically a 15% performance penalty for running this in the translated version versus the native ARM version. So that's at least interesting to get that number out there. Now, this is for one app, though, so I don't think we should go way too far into just saying it's exactly 15% for every single app out there, right? It's not that. So, but it is a number, at least in one test. Now, also interesting, applications that require native AVX2 support will not run in translation mode. So it looks like the translation mode can't handle AVX2. So depending on what apps you run, that could be a big issue. Now, Cinebench is an app that requires AVX2. However, the Cinebench developers were able to create an ARM version with ARM instructions plus extensions added by Qualcomm, despite the x86 version requiring AVX2. So Cinebench developers, so the developers had to do this, but they were able to get a version up and running on Qualcomm. Now, performance in the native ARM version of Cinebench, and therefore in Cinema 4D, is higher than that of the desktop AMD Ryzen 7 5800X using the x86 version. So that's pretty interesting. So it's beating an 8-core 16-thread processor desktop version from a number of years ago. So it's kind of a random test, CPU to put this up against, because we're not talking about laptop, we're not talking about current generation, we're talking about previous generation, about to be 2 generations old desktop chip. But still an 8-core 16-thread desktop chip. So interesting, and it's saying that it's higher than that, but they aren't giving us an exact number. They also say the laptop heats up just like any x86 laptop under load. Who would doubt it? Anyway, so that's at least the most concrete information I've been able to find as far as actual, like third-party testing on one of these. I'm really excited to see what happens once these are actually out in the wild and people can give them full reviews. Now, is this a little bit scary for Intel and AMD, the x86 makers? Well, Intel says that they're happy to make the ARM chips that threaten its x86 hegemony. In other words, Pat Gelsinger, when discussing this, basically said that they think that their Lunar Lake chips are awesome, and there's no reason why people would need to ditch them in favor of ARM chips. But they said even if they do, they're happy to use their foundries to produce ARM chips, and they'll make money off that anyway. So that was kind of Intel's response to that. Now, there's a bit of a looming issue over all of this huge Windows on ARM push. And that's the fact that ARM and Qualcomm, who's producing these Snapdragon X Elites using, the ARM license, are actually in a legal battle that could potentially freeze this entire thing. Now, I don't think it will, because it's honestly in ARM's best interest to not just shoot the big Windows on ARM push, like kill it right as it's trying to launch, right? It doesn't make, because it's ARM suing Qualcomm, because Qualcomm acquired a company that ARM had issues with their technology basically in the ARM chip, and ARM claims that Qualcomm's new processors are descended from that, and that they didn't get permission to continue their ARM license after that acquisition. It's all a little bit complicated, but the point is that if this really did come to a head, it could potentially freeze all of this in the works. But again, I don't think it's in either company's best interest for that to happen, so I doubt they would pursue that too heavily. But that is kind of looming in the background of all of this. Also looming in the background on all of this is a big part of not just a Windows on ARM, but an AI push. But the question has always been, but what are we even doing with the NPUs on the PCs? Well, one of Microsoft's big features has been their recall, which takes a snapshot of everything you do every few seconds on your PC. And there's been a massive push against this. I talked in my last news roundup video about the potential to hack this, and that the information was stored in like plain text, unencrypted, and that this was not even opt-in, you had to opt out. So with all of this pushback, Microsoft has started reworking recall after all of these big issues being pointed out. The big changes are that it will become opt-in rather than opt-out, meaning your PC will not default to having recall enabled. You will have to check a button saying that you want recall to be enabled. And I think that is a huge improvement. And they're also talking about encrypting the data better and requiring a Windows Hello login. So either with a face scan or a fingerprint or a PIN code to access any of that information. Because previously, it was disturbingly easy for anyone or any program on your PC to access all of that. And that's my main concern, is because even while Microsoft is saying that they aren't going to, access any of this information and send it to the cloud or to their servers, it stays local on the device, what do other programs on your PC have the ability to read this recall database? Because if they can, what's stopping any program on your PC from accessing that information? And because that's a huge treasure trove of information to data mine, even if they're not planning on like stealing your passwords and financial information, just to data mine all of that. It's anyway. So Microsoft's at least trying to back off on some of the most egregious parts of this, but still the idea in and of itself is fundamentally a security problem. I think no matter how much they back off on it. But anyway, what else are you going to do with these NPUs? Well, the graphics card partner PowerColor has an idea, which is to actually use the NPU to manage the power efficiency of your graphics card. And they're claiming 22% power efficiency increases, even beyond, even more effective than switching to AMD's like power saving profiles. However, when you look at the actual performance numbers, they drop as well, but you're getting more you're getting more energy savings than you are performance loss. So it's a net efficiency benefit. So at least this is kind of interesting, although it's unclear to me exactly what it's doing. I think it's just using the NPU to manage the power tuning profiles intelligently rather than actually using the NPU to like do any of the gaming workload. So that's kind of interesting. But another big issue with these NPUs and with the push to the ARM features and everything is it really does feel like Microsoft is trying to pick a winner with ARM. Because with these Copilot Plus PCs, it sounds like Intel and AMD's Copilot Plus PCs won't actually be able to use the Copilot AI features when they launch. Which, I mean, I have to imagine that behind the scenes, AMD and Intel are absolutely furious over this. Because the amount of die area that they're having to dedicate to these NPUs to get the Copilot Plus branding and support is not insignificant. There's a lot of die area being dedicated to this. And so for them to not even have the features supported at launch just feels like a massive slap in the face from Microsoft. And there's no confirmation on when they will even get it. Possibly in 2024, although no confirmation. Seems like AMD thinks it will, or at least they're trying to, sound optimistic about that. It's really interesting. I wish I had the quote brought up here, but during AMD's keynote, she brought up a Microsoft representative and was discussing this, and on stage, it almost felt like she was kind of throwing some backhanded stuff at Microsoft about the die area being required for this, because she was basically saying, you do know this takes a lot of die area. When are we going to get the applications for these NPUs? Anyway, it's pretty interesting. So I don't know. It kind of seems like Microsoft's trying to pick a winner with the ARM stuff to really put a push on the Windows on ARM before Intel and AMD have a chance to compete in that area. So I don't know if I'm misreading that, but that's kind of what I'm getting out of it. So again, what are the big use cases? Well, I did a video talking about automatic super resolution, which once again will only be compatible on the Snapdragon chips at first, and then eventually probably become compatible with Intel and AMD NPUs. So there's that, which seems kind of interesting. I want to follow up on it, but see my other video on that topic if you want my full thoughts on that. So again, it's just kind of like, what are we doing with all of this? Well, I'm honestly more interested in the desktop gaming CPU space anyway. So when are we getting the X3D CPUs? Because AMD announced the non-X3D CPUs for the Ryzen 9000 series. So the big speculation now is, so if you're a gamer waiting for the X3D version, how long are you going to have to wait, and is it worth waiting? Well, to be clear, while this headline says they're targeting a September release, this is a leak/rumor. I'm getting this from Club 386. Where are they getting this information from? So again, this is one of those behind-the-scenes discussions at Computex. So Club 386 is saying that their source on the Computex show floor is telling us that AMD plans to launch the 9000 X3D processors in September. Now, I'll also say that launch doesn't necessarily mean launch onto store shelves. It could mean like their official unveiling, which could still be a month or so in advance of when they'd actually hit store shelves. Just like how we got the announcement for the 9000 non-3D chips at Computex, but they're not on store shelves yet, right? Anyway, but that would be a lot, if it is announced in September or launched in September, that is a much shorter time jump than what we saw between like the 7000 series and the X3D series. So we'll have to see what comes of it. They do say that their source sounded like they had a high confidence level when they said this. And according to Club 386, this source is trustworthy enough to put stock into. But they also say that with AMD's nebulous launch schedules, that even if this is their current plan, it's not necessarily what will actually happen when we get to that date. But anyway, I knew a bunch of you were interested in this, as am I, because that's probably when I'm going to upgrade my test bench and things like that, is when we get the next 3D V-cache chips. So that's the best info I can find on you on that. But what's going to actually happen with them? Because this is another thing I've been seeing a lot of information about, which is AMD is working actively on really cool differentiators to make the next generation of 3D V-cache even better. Now, while at the headline at face value, that sounds good, I'm actually concerned about this when I read more details into this. This is a PC Gamer article. Now, so the thing is that they were talking to an AMD marketing representative, and they were saying that that AMD did tell them they were working actively on really cool differentiators to make 3D V-cache even better. And again, this was another Computex discussion. They said, the X3D stuff, we have a lot to say about it. The best part about it is we're not just resting on laurels. We're improving what we can do with X3D. It's really exciting, and I'm super looking forward to talking to people about that. He didn't go into specifics, but said it's not like, hey, we've also added X3D to a chip. We are working actively on really cool differentiators to make it even better. we're working on X3D, we're improving it. Now, I actually am scared of this word differentiators, okay? I'm scared of that, especially coming from a marketing person. Because here's the thing, with the 7000 series X3D chips, you could get the 7800 X3D and basically get the top of the line gaming performance for a really good, as top of the line gaming performance goes, value. But the 7900 X3D and 7950 X3D, which cost a lot more money, didn't really offer you better gaming performance, and in some cases worse because of scheduling issues onto the two CCDs. So what I'm worried about here is what if their differentiators are designed to make the top-end gaming performance only happen on the 9950 X3D, and then also have the 9900 X3D better than the 9800 X3D, if those are even the naming schemes they go with, or if they even launch all of those products. I don't know. I'm just worried about the marketing team wanting further differentiation between those tiers in gaming to try to make the end user have to pay that higher price to get the higher end part to get the top end gaming performance. Now, maybe I'm just being overly cynical and negative here, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm worried about marketing people being excited about further differentiators in the 3D V-Cache lineup. So anyway, now, other information we have about the non-3D parts is that it looks like, again, engineering samples of the, in this case, Ryzen 5 9600X, that's the 6-core part, are out there, and a cache test is confirming a massively increased L1, L2 bandwidth, which is one of the claims that AMD made. So AMD did claim up to 2 times the instruction bandwidth for front-end instructions from their next-gen high-performance CPU core, up to data bandwidth, L2 to L1 and L1 to FP, AI performance, all of that. Anyway, the point is that there's big claims for some of the cache speed improvements, and there's some screenshots of some engineering samples here that seem to be actually validating those claims. So in these CPU Z and AIDA64 cache and memory benchmarks, there are some big numbers here. And according to this videocards.com summary, we're seeing Ryzen 5 7600X versus 9600X. We're seeing read speeds going from a little over 2,000 to nearly 4,000. Write speeds going from a little over 1,000 to a little under 2,000. Copy going from a little over 2,000 to a little under 4,000, and latency slightly higher, going from 0.7 to 0.8. So that's pretty interesting. L2 cache was also seeing similar gains. So these aren't 2x, but these are like 85% higher results. So that's actually pretty cool to see an engineering sample actually showing off those types of gains. It'll be curious to see what that means for gaming performance in those cache speed increases. We're also seeing that same 9600X engineering sample getting overclocked to 5.7 gigahertz across all cores, which is much higher than the 7600X could do, at least on typical, non-golden sample silicon. So interesting. Again, we'll have to see what comes of it. Now, the last thing I want to end today's news with is, well, technically this would be more console space. I talk a lot about the PC gaming handhelds, and it's unclear if Xbox's rumored handheld will be more like a gaming PC. But I watched this IGN interview with Phil Spencer, and while he wouldn't actually just confirm an Xbox handheld, he basically confirmed an Xbox handheld. He laughed about it. He talked about it being like a really good idea. He knew exactly what they were talking about, and he even responded to the question, which was basically, had to be put to him as a hypothetical, but the hypothetical was, so let's say there was, an Xbox handheld, not saying there is, would you want it to be, more cloud-based, or more, in other words, would it need access? I think that it was phrased as, would you need access to Wi-Fi for it to work? And Phil Spencer basically said, that in his experience playing on things like the ROG Ally, the Legion Go, the Steam Deck, he really likes it being able to run games locally, and he feels that's very important. So it sounds like if we do get an Xbox handheld, and it sounds like he's very strongly hinting that that's the case, that it's not going to be something more like the PlayStation Portal, where it's just streaming, and it's not just going to be, streaming, Xbox Cloud games. It sounds like he's very committed to the importance of playing games locally. And I find that pretty interesting. There was also, I guess I'll throw this in there, some new designs for the Xbox Series X and S. But other than more storage and potentially different pricing, although the pricing hasn't been revealed, and a different look, kind of all digital versions and things like that, not a whole lot to say about that. Anyway, hopefully you guys found today's news roundup useful and or interesting. Huge thank you to channel viewers, subscribers, commenters, and especially channel members who click the join button to directly support the channel financially. We could say that today's episode was sponsored by channel members, since we didn't have a sponsor out there. In thanks, I do give little membership badges in comments, so stand out in the comments, easier for me to find them and read them. I also, this is now my summer break off from teaching. And I am planning on getting a lot more members behind the scenes videos out there. I might even record one immediately after filming this one. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Huge thank you for those channel members. Totally understand not everybody's in a position to do that financially. Totally understand that's totally okay. I appreciate all of you, and I hope everyone has an excellent day.